Yo, back at it again, and one more time for the one time. It's Cain coming to you all the way live. Your favorite country cousin, your favorite Mississippian, and your best friend. We, my friends, family, friends, associates, whatever you would like to be called at this point. But we have made it to the halfway mark. 5 out of 10 mental shampoo and audio experience plus more. I am excited that you continue to tap in with your boy. I do not take the attention lightly. I do not take you listening to the things that I have to say lightly. Again, mental shampoo are things that I've learned over the years and things that I learned from my peers, from their life experiences as well. Now, as we get into the episode, or more so chapter 5, we're going to talk about being childlike versus childish. A popular conversation that happens often is that you have masculinity versus femininity. That is a very hot topic at this point, but I want to kind of extend the conversation into being childlike versus childish. Now, when we're younger, we are constantly trying to rush into adulthood. But the fact of the matter is this. I was having this conversation with one of my cousins in Chicago, and I had mentioned, because he said something that he was teaching his kids, and I said, yeah, man, because at the end of the day, they're going to be adults longer than they have been children. And that's a fact. But here's what we need to learn how to do. Balance our adulthood with our childhood, meaning we need to continue to cater to and water the child within, okay? I have a book. It's called Healing Your Aloneness, Finding Love and Wholeness Through Your Inner Child. This book was recommended and suggested to be by a good friend, Christina. So shout out to Christina. It's been a beautiful read so far. I'm actually in chapter 9. By the time y'all see this video, I should be done with the book. But I've learned quite a bit through this book. And it talks about connecting with your inner child and how important that is. And it discusses also the masculine and feminine talk as well, the higher purpose, the higher self-talk as well in this book. But we're going to talk about childlike versus childish. Now, is there a difference? Absolutely. Slightly, but absolutely. Both are considering the child, right? But being childlike is more of the positive things, right? You got fearless, curious, kind, happy, energetic, being engaged, and being positive. Now, being childish, anything that's like along the lines of being petty, that's what I would call being childish. But I got some things written down here. Being immature, right? Being short-tempered, being needy, being greedy. Here's a big one, being inconsiderate, right? Like I tell some of my students at work, some of my 10th graders, I say, hey, you got to learn how to be considerate. You know, it's not just yourself when you're doing the things that you do. You got to think about your folks. You got to think about how things are going to affect in the classroom and things of that nature in terms of your grades. If you end up being suspended for a fight or whatever the case may be, you know, don't be inconsiderate, just thinking there's only you in the picture. But being childish, right? You're being inconsiderate or being negative, okay? Now, what is a child? Simply put, it's a young person. A child is a young person. Childlike, the definition says, resembling or suggesting a child or like that of a child. Childish, the definition is having or showing the annoying qualities associated with children's immaturity. All right. Now, with us being in our adult-like self, we have to learn how to parent our inner child. We have to make the choices to make sure that we are placing and putting our inner child in the right positions, for lack of better words. Okay. But one thing I can appreciate about being childlike above a lot of things is that because when we get older and we get into our adulthood, a lot of our creativity seems to diminish. A lot of our imagination is very limited. But I like to refer back to the SpongeBob episodes when he talks about imagination, right? You want to continue to feed and water that inner child so that you continue to have strength in your creativity and your imagination. I know for me, I watch movies, cartoon movies from time to time that helps continue to feed my creativity and do the things that I do, such as this, right? Become like children, but don't be a child. That's one of my bullets that I have here. Become like children, but do not become a child. Like, y'all know how it is. You know, kids oftentimes gossip. Kids do these things that are annoying, right? Like the definition of being childish talked about. You know, don't be at work, you know, gossiping and doing all these silly things that can really come back to haunt you in the long run or bite you in the ass, right? You know, become like children, but don't be a child. Another note that I have, being childlike increases in adults' ability. Like I mentioned, me feeding, because I like animation. So when I feed myself these cartoon movies, or when I'm drawing in my sketchbook, or if I'm coloring in my coloring book, or solving a crossword puzzle, things of that nature, I am increasing my ability as a grown man to continue to find better ways for me to live in this thing we call life. All right? Now, y'all know I got to give you a scripture. Okay? 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. It reads that when I was a child, I spoke like a child. I reasoned like a child. There's only a certain amount of understanding that you have as a child, right? I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put away all childish things. You know, I put away the annoying things, for lack of better words, right? Now, I know a lot of adults, when a kid is constantly asking why, the adult may get annoyed, but I actually like that about a child, that they continue to ask questions, right? I don't consider that to be childish. I consider that to be childlike. But put everything else, though, like the negativity and the annoying, other annoying things, put that behind you. Like, we don't need that no more. I was watching recently a TED Talk, one of the best TED Talks I've ever seen in my life. And it was by a 7-year-old. And she demonstrated how important it is for adults to feed a child between the ages of 0 to 5. So while in the womb, while developing, because the baby does feel and hear the energy around it when it's in the mother's belly, from 0 to 5 years old, that's when a child is really developing everything that they're going to need for the rest of their life, right? This little 7-year-old talked about how the brain develops all the way up until it's 5 years old. She talked about the importance of the connectivity between the parent or an adult and the child. She gave 5 tips, 5 tips to help one thrive by age 5. And the first tip was connecting. You know, connecting with the parent not necessarily being in their phone all day while the child is trying to get your attention, right? Because at that point, the child is going to feel neglected. And she actually gave a demonstration. She had her neighbor to get involved in the TED Talk, as well as the neighbor's child, and they demonstrated. And so it demonstrated the father playing with the kid, how the child was happy and joyful in that connectivity. And then they gave a nice little 30 seconds of the dad ignoring the kid, and the man was on his phone. The child was getting frustrated because, you know, the dad wasn't paying attention to him. And so the young lady had instructed the dad to re-engage, right? And after that, it's like the connectivity was never lost. But then she posed the question and asked if that kid's childhood remained like that for the remaining of the childhood, like those past 30 seconds, for as long as they did that disconnect, right? Like, how would that child become as an adult? In most cases, they would be disconnected from connectivity, having the ability to connect with anyone and things of that nature. Tip number 2, talking. Babies ain't necessarily talking like that, but I talk to my inner child quite often. I ask how it's doing. In a previous chapter, I talked about hugging that inner child. I embrace my inner child. I make sure that the inner child is doing good. And I'm still learning from reading this book. I'm still learning how to properly handle the inner child in me, and to live out more childlike traits versus childish traits. Okay. Tip number 3: playing. When I was younger, riding four-wheelers, riding the bikes in the bayou. I was raised in the country, so we had cows, chickens, and all that, chasing after the chickens, all of that, right? Playing outside, just being outside. My kid self enjoyed that a great deal. And my adult self, what I enjoy is going hiking, riding my bike, working out outside. I have a gym membership. I don't go as often as I should. I'm pretty lean. I work out, but I would prefer to work out outside. Like, feel the cool breeze, get the direct vitamin D from the sunlight. I just enjoy being outside. A healthy home. That also helps to develop, a child's brain as it continues to grow. Like, thank God I had a pretty decent home growing up. I had my mother's love as well as my grandmother's love. You dig what I'm saying? And now as an adult, I have to make sure, me and one of my friends talked about letting certain energies into your household, right? Like keeping the home healthy. I know some people like to light their plasanto and their sage, and they they let the vibes, they clear it out with the plasanto and the I think I'm saying that right, and the sage, right, to clear out any negative energies that may be within the home. And then science proves too, instead of like keeping your bedroom or your home situated the same way, switch it out like every 3 to 4 months. It creates like a different atmosphere. It feels like a new home, even if it isn't, just by switching a couple of things around. And then lastly, community. That connectivity, back from tip number 1, that helps build a strong community, being the 5th tip, okay? And so this little girl, she said that those 5 tips helps the brain to form and for a person to reach their full potential. So you're constantly interacting with your inner child, even in adulthood. Okay, we will not throw our childhood away, even if it's bad. I'm sure that we've all had challenging things growing up. I know I've shared some things on here about what I've seen in my childhood, what I've experienced. But not all of your childhood experiences were bad. There are some good times that you can pull out and utilize for your adult self. Okay. One thing I can appreciate about things like Disney has these movies, okay? These animations, Pixar and all these different folks, right? And it's entertainment for these kids, but it's life lessons for adults, in my humble opinion. Because if you go back and rewatch The Lion King, if you go back and rewatch even one of the newer movies, Soul, like a kid probably won't necessarily understand everything that's going on within the film, but like you watch these things with your adult eye, now you can put the logistics together and put your childhood, mesh that all together and see how it works, why certain things happen, and why didn't you quite understand it as a child versus why you understand it more as an adult. Like even in The Lion King, like I had kind of came to the grips of, with Simba coming back to his kingdom, and how Rafiki had to pretty much literally knock some sense into this man, you know what I'm saying, to go back to the crib, handle his business, and conquer like he knew, like Rafiki knew that he could, and eventually Simba knew that he could, right? But he was running away from something, right? Because he was given the false belief that it was his fault that his father had passed away. So it's a lot of things that we run from in our childhood, but that's why, and again, this book talks about that. It's important to have that conversation with your inner child so that you can have a better understanding as to the different things that you experience in your childhood, because a lot of that stuff grows up with us. And I'm gonna keep it all the way a buck with you. I am finally fully stepping into my adulthood and my manhood because for a long time I looked at myself as the 10-year-old, 11-year-old Kemar, right? And for me to break out of the uh I don't want to say jail because that just sounds horrible. But for me to break out of that mindset and fully like learn to fully step into my adulthood and my manhood, it feels great because now I can better communicate with my childlike self without necessarily being bound by the childish things that have happened, right? Another Disney movie, Soul, again, this is an animation where we see folks that look like us, right? For one. So a kid being able to see their representation early on in their childhood is great. I grew up on things like Casper and Toy Story and the other movie Ants, all them different other animations. But like you didn't see a lot of people of color or whatever the case may be in these animated films. So to see Soul and to see that representation is great for any young child, especially. But of course, entertainment for the young child. But for the adult, what I got is that the guy was reaching for a desired level, and after he actually reached that level, it was like, what's next? And then the lady, the person that he was looking forward to playing with at this jazz nightclub, right? She was like, yeah, same time tomorrow. And he was like, oh, that's it? And she said, yeah. See you tomorrow, same time. And it's like throughout that film, he learned really what was important in his life. He learned that there's not necessarily a field or a thing that fulfills your quote unquote purpose, right? Because there's always going to be a what's next. When you reach these certain checkpoints that you've been constantly striving to accomplish and achieve, there's always going to be the question of what's next until we pass away. Just going to keep it a buck with you. So you have to find within yourself, really, and that's another issue. We oftentimes seek out, right, for fulfillment when really everything is on the inside, okay? Every single thing that we need is on the inside. So when Brother Soul was able to look within his soul and like really understand what was important, he was able to live a better life, right? I probably spoiled the movie for some, but I would implore, if you haven't seen the film, definitely go watch the film. Another example, the movie Toy Story that I mentioned, is one of those movies that I grew up on. Like, looking at that movie now, it's like you see how you can outgrow a thing. You don't see much of Andy, right? But the toys, they have feelings at this point, and they see that, hey, Andy is growing up. Andy don't want to play with certain toys no more. After a while, Andy isn't going to want to play with any of the toys no more. And it's like you're outgrowing the thing. Or in your adult self, you're outgrowing the person, you're outgrowing the job, you're outgrowing certain habits, so on and so forth. You're outgrowing fill in the blank, right? And those are some of the things that the movie Toy Story showed me. So, I just want all of us to continue, or even start rather, to nurture your inner child, nurture your childlike traits, put away the ways of childish things behind you. There's no need for it. Still have fun, but be responsible about it. Like, even when you taking a little sippy sip, what do folks always say on the can or on the bottle in the commercials? Drink responsibly. Handle your inner child responsibly, right? Because what we want to do is heal ourselves, okay? We want to heal ourselves. And so that's another, again, how I started this conversation with the popular conversation of masculinity versus femininity. The extension of this, which was this whole chapter, was the childlikeness versus the childishness, right? And it's one word that comes to mind from talking about all of this, and it's called vulnerability. Now, vulnerability, you give yourself permission to like be free and let go of things without the fear of judgment, you know. And vulnerability brings about a greater strength within oneself. You dig what I'm saying? Vulnerability brings about a greater strength within oneself. So allow yourself to be vulnerable. All right. Allow yourself to allow your inner child to speak. Don't cut off the inner child, because the inner child will end up resenting you. Okay? And the inner child might not want to fool with you. Now, I'm going to end on this note right here, because this has been bringing about a great sense of peace for me. I've always wanted to learn the piano as a child. Back then, my mom couldn't really afford the piano lessons, but now, being my adult self, I have to make the proper decisions for my inner child so that I can be more fulfilled as an adult. It's my responsibility, right, to get a keyboard and learn piano and keyboard, these musical notes, so that I can fulfill that for me. And by doing that, I'll be able to achieve much, much more and be more and more happy with my life. You dig what I'm saying? So me learning piano, I wanted to be a pro boxer growing up. I had a couple of boxing lessons. Now I just got to keep that thing going. I gotta find a steady flow within that. So learning the piano, becoming a pro boxer. Basketball is my favorite sport back then. Boxing is my favorite sport now. But when I was a kid, basketball was my favorite sport. So it's like I got a basketball in the trunk of my car. It's like every now and then you got to take it out the car and do a little dribble, go play a game of some sort, right? I got a nice little jumper on me. I'm a little rusty, so I'm going to have to flick the wrist and practice a little bit. But I got a nice little 3-shot, nice little jumper on me. But yeah, man, like, all of those things. And I drew a lot when I was younger, which is why I got my sketchbook now. And I see that I still got it a little bit. I used to draw Rugrats and all that when I was younger. And I would give it to my older sister, and she would hang these drawings up in her office at work. And it made me feel like I had real life masterpieces. You know what I'm saying? So it's like getting back to everything that I loved as a child. And when you do that, man, you dig what I'm saying? You're going to come out more healthier and more whole. And that's all we want to do, is become more whole in life. I've said it on here before, man. Like, you are your greatest project. And when we can actually connect with the child within, oh, man, you're going to see life change for you in such a way that it is hard to understand or describe. Okay, so childlike versus childish. Don't be out here being petty, being negative, being annoying. You know what I'm saying? The only thing that I would say that I would switch from childish to childlike, ask a plethora of questions, because questions are important. Questions are how we learn, right? And the more that we learn, the more that we can teach. You dig what I'm saying? It's Cain coming to y'all to be live, your favorite country cousin, your favorite Mississippian, and your best friend. You have just tapped into chapter number 5 of Mental Shampoo and Audio Experience plus more. Hey, man, 5 more chapters to go. I'm excited, elated, beatific, all of those things that relate to the word happy. And I can't wait for y'all to tap in chapter 6, man. Thank y'all for rocking with me, and see y'all next time for sure.